Okay, I've got the piston head robot apart, and because it wasn't walking in the last video. And basically, what I found is this serpentine gear is cracked. This one isn't. This is one I just pressed on. I took it out of one of the Chinese spacewalk men. Now these days sold as Mr. D cell or something like that. Pressed on this new one. The gear that's in the leg that it mates with seems to be fine. I'm adding some washer spacers to try to hold the gear in the best location for mating. And this piece of metal, which I can't read Japanese and I can't tell you what it used to be, but it's very thin metal. There's even some writing up there. I don't know what's upside right and what's upside down. But this is very, very thin, and it allows things to move. So that's why I'm adding some washers to try to hold everything in place. And look at this bizarre little gear motor. I can't think of any other vintage robot I have that has a contraption like that. Almost all the walking robots have kind of the same design and scaffolding, and this is almost like it was an afterthought. Now I understand the bent crank up here is there because it engages the piston head crank, but still a very strange little device. So we're going to find out, maybe, trying to see just how this all looks. I don't think the tabs will take one more bend. The metal is so thin that I am worried. And so I'm doing this manually to find out if it's going to walk. So far it seems to be. So I will attempt to bend some of these tabs once more. I'm bending them as slowly as I can so they maybe won't break. But you never know on these things. Man, that's thin metal. It's like a pop can, except they're aluminum, and this isn't aluminum. Okay, I've got 3 of them bent. Trying to see if I should have bent that one before I set the gear motor in place. It probably would have been easier. Live and learn, right? That one doesn't seem to have ever been bent before, so I'm going to leave it. Okay. Those go like that. Now, before I go any further, this whole mechanism does have a polarity that it's going to work best at, because the pistons in the head can only rotate in one direction or they lock up due to the cam that's used in there. So I'm going to try to apply the power in the correct polarity. Okay, the walking legs are moving. That's a good sign. So now we can put this on the back, like so. Hasn't gone in yet. It's tabbed in the back, and then there are 2 metal tabs that get bent in the front. Again, the metal tabs that I'm bending now are that same thin piece of metal that I showed you earlier. Very flimsy stuff. Not going to like to be bent too many times. Okay, now I need to solder the 2 motor wires on, and of course soldering pencil is not up to temperature, so you're going to have to wait just a moment. I'll get a couple of C-cell batteries, hopefully. And see if we can solder this on. There's one wire. There's the other one. Okay. Well, now, maybe you can see if I aim this up a little bit. See how the piston head has this crank that comes? This crank will lock up if you turn it the wrong way. That's why the motor has to go in the right direction. When it's moved in the right direction, then it moves the pistons in the head. And there's a crank coming up from this shaft. So it's the easiest way to connect two things together. Just use 2 bent cranks and wait for them to touch. The only bad thing about using the crank mechanism is if any of the wires from the head or from the motor or from the battery box happen to get caught up in any of that, then tends to make a problem. Now the good news is the front of the body, the part that I'm setting on right now, is held on with some screws. No tabs. Very unusual. Welcome, but very unusual. And you never want to over tighten these, because again they're going into very thin metal and they would just strip out. Like that. And then let's get these in place, and we'll find out if the thing's going to work or jam up and lock. Okay. That. This. Hope these batteries are good. Two C-cells in the bot. Let's find out what happens. Hey, locking. The pistons are moving. Another robot life saved. Piston Head robot.